What's going on, everyone? Corey from Yacht Expedition here. Behind me I have our 22 Tacoma, and today we're going to be installing a leveling kit from Icon. So from factory, the Tacoma is going to come a little bit lower in the front than the rear. I did just give it a quick measurement, and I got 21 inches in the front and 22 inches in the rear. So the front's sitting about an inch lower. This is a 2-inch leveling kit, but I doubt it's going to actually lift it 2 inches, but we'll see once it's installed. I'll go ahead and measure it. But we're gonna go ahead and get the Tacoma on the lift, get the wheels off, and start taking out the front suspension. So going over a leveling kit really quick and what it's for is essentially a budget way to lift the front of your vehicle so that it is level with the rear. And with going something like this, it's going to allow you to run some bigger tires, especially if you're not someone that's gonna be towing all the time. The reason the Toyota comes the way it does from factory is so when you're putting a load on the back, it then sits level with the front. But if you're not going to be someone that's towing all the time and you're doing more off-roading, or you just want your vehicle to look level, that's what a leveling kit is for. So pretty much the only thing you're going to get in the box is the leveling kit spacers, which are going to be going on top of the front strut assembly. And you got a couple of stickers and a QR code for an install guide. So I'm going to go ahead and get the Tacoma up on the lift, get the front wheels and tires off, and then we can start showing you how to take out the front suspension. All right, so we have the Tacoma up in the air, we got the wheels off, and now we're ready to start unbolting things so that we can get our front strut assembly out. So what we're gonna be doing is loosening the 2 bolts on the inner side of the lower control arm. And then we're gonna be taking the 2 bolts out the bottom that hold the lower ball joint to the knuckle. And then that's going to allow the lower control arm to swing down. Before that is able to swing down, you also have to take out the bolt on the bottom of the strut. But once we have that out and that is out of our way, we just have 3 nuts on the top, and we can pull that whole strut assembly out and we can put on our leveling kit. So we're gonna go ahead and take the bolt out on the bottom of the strut, which is a 19. You might need to put a wrench on the opposite side to hold it. But it did come off. All right, so that's now loose. Our knuckle is now loose from our lower control arm. So now that we have those things loosened, we can loosen the bolts on the backside of the lower control arm. Those are concentric bolts, so what that means is as you turn them left and right, it's going to shift your lower control arm in and out, and that's something that they use when they go to do your alignment. So you want to make sure not to mess with that. There's 2 nuts, one that's actually just going to loosen it and one that's going to adjust it. So we're just going to loosen the one that makes it tight. If you want, you could mark where your concentric bolts are so that when you go to put it back together, you can make sure that they are in the same position. So we're going to go ahead and loosen those up now. So looking on those bolts for your lower control arm, you can see there is lines here on this washer. So what I'm going to do is use a paint marker, and I'm going to put a dab right where the center line is. So then when I go to put these back together, or tighten them up, should I say, I know if I need to adjust it or not to get it back to where it was. But like I said, when they do your alignment, they're going to be adjusting these to do what they need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen those up. These are a 22 millimeter. Hopefully I can just use the air impact on the 1/2 and be able to loosen it without holding it on the other side. In order to get this one loose, we're probably going to have to drop the skid plate so we can get better access to the bolt in here. Because this side is all one piece, where this side was a double nut, we were able to loosen that. This one, the concentric washer with all of the markings on it, and where you're loosening is all one piece. So we're gonna go off of this side instead. So to get that off, we're gonna have 4 12mm bolts. I got 2 here in the front and 2 here on the back. And that should simply just come right off. So you have hooks here on the front, so it's not going to just fall on your head. So we got the 22 on there, 22 wrench on the other side. We don't want to take it completely off, just make it loose so that it can move. So now if I take out this bolt here on the bottom side of our strut, our lower control arm can swing out of our way. Now we can just take the 3 nuts off the top and we can pull this whole assembly out. So for the top nuts, we're going to be using a 14mm wrench. Probably should have lowered this down to make it a little bit easier, but so once we have all of those cracked loose, just hold the strut up to take the pressure off of it hanging down, and you can just take them off with your fingers. This one's a little tight yet. Now we can feed this down through. There we go. All right, so we're gonna go ahead now and put on our leveling kit from Icon. We're gonna be using the factory nuts to attach that to your strut assembly, and then the new nuts that come with it, we're gonna be using to attach this whole assembly back into the Tacoma. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down. Now we're ready to put this back up in there and get these 3 nuts started to hold it in place. It's a little bit of work to do about 10 seconds of work and then put everything back together. All right, so you have to make sure your orientation is right when you put it in there so everything lines up. There we go. See ya. So if I'm guessing, the new nuts that came with it are not the same size as the OEM ones because that's how it always goes. They're probably a 15. Anytime you get new hardware, it's always an odd size. Something you never use. A 13, a 15. So we'll see. Yep, not a 14. So these are a 15. Go ahead and tighten all of these down. All right, so we got the 3 nuts up there tight. Now we can swing our lower control arm back up and get our bolt slipped back in for the bottom. of that. There it is. Put your washer back on, and your nut. So now I'm going to go ahead and lower this. We're going to take the jack, we're going to jack up on the lower control arm so that we can get the bolt started for the lower ball joint, because now that we put that spacer in there, it's going to hold that lower control arm down farther than before, so you can't just thread the bolts back in. I'm going slow because if I go too fast, I might pick the truck up off the lift. So I got that jacked up as much as I can until I started actually seeing the whole Tacoma lifting. So the rest of the way, I can just push down on the upper control arm so I can get these bolts at least started. That one started. All right, so we got both of those started. Go ahead and get these tightened up. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten the bottom bolt on our strut. So I'm at the point where the only thing I have left to do is tighten the lower control arm bolts. But I'm going to go ahead and finish the other side first. And then I'm not going to tighten these until I have the wheels back on and it's on the ground. That's the time when you want to go and tighten these, and I'll explain more when I get there.
20 minutes later.
We have both sides finished up. We're going to go ahead and throw the wheels and tires on real quick, and then we're going to put it on the ground. And then we are going to tighten the lower control arm bolts. And the reason we are going to do it that way is because you want to preload your suspension before you tighten those bolts, because if you were to tighten them in the position that they are right now, and then you go ahead and you put your wheels and tires on, you let it on the ground, and your suspension becomes preloaded, those bushings are going to twist, and you could potentially rip the rubber over time. So what you want to do is tighten this down when the suspension is at its normal operating level. So then you're not going to be putting any extra stress on those bushings that you don't need to. If anyone's wondering, these are 265/70s, which is the factory tire size, but they're a mud terrain from Geolander, Yokohama's. So they look good on here. I'm gonna go ahead and let it down so we can preload the suspension. Now I'm gonna go under there. I'm gonna make sure that our washers with the dashes on it are lined up where we had it before. And then I can go ahead and tighten down those bolts. All right, so these are way off. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that so that it is back to where it was. Make sure the other side is where it was as well before I go ahead and tighten this up. All right, so we got those lined back up and tightened down. So I just need to put the skid plate on, and we're gonna take it out and do a quick test drive, get the suspension moving and stuff so we can actually see, one, how it rides, and then let it settle in so we can actually see the real ride height. Hook these back on. Ooh. So we're taking it on a test drive. Right away I could tell it just feels higher looking out of the windshield. It just looks, you can visually see that you are sitting higher than before. So we're just going to drive it around for a little bit and see how it feels suspension wise, if it's any stiffer than it was before. Because essentially what you're doing by putting a leveling kit on is you're increasing the spring rate, because in order to get the whole shock assembly together, you need to compress the spring more. So in theory, it should ride stiffer in the front, but we'll see. So I'm doing almost 50 miles an hour, steering wheel straight, no shakes, no pulls. So you should still get an alignment, but where we have it is going to be good enough for you to make an appointment and take it somewhere and get an actual alignment done. But overall it drives nice. So we're just about back at the shop. I'm going to pull it in about the same spot we had it parked before, and I'm going to remeasure and see what we have as far as lift differences. So yeah. So before we had 21 from the center of our hub to the bottom of our fender flare. So it looks like now we have 23.5. So it's 2.5 inches. This shouldn't really have changed. We had 22 back here. 22.5. It's kind of hard to measure this perfectly. So the inch is sitting about an inch. Yeah, the front is sitting about an inch higher, but it all depends on suspension. I mean, the shocks and springs on this are brand new. So if you have something that has more miles on it, they're a little bit more worn out. Once you put the spacer kit on, the leveling kit, it might sit a little bit more level than what we have right now. All right, so even though the front is now sitting a little bit higher than the rear, if you were to go and put a front bumper or something on this, it's gonna be adding some more weight. It would bring it down to be more level with the rear. Also, you could add a 1-inch lift block to the rear, which we're gonna be doing a separate install video on that in the future. So if you wanna pick up this leveling kit, it's available on yodaexpedition.com. You can click the link down in the description. So thanks for watching.